Hello, this is Susan Bean, here to teach some Photoshop. And tonight I thought we would look at Photoshop effects. They spell it FX, kind of their cute way of saying it. And the place where you find it is over at the bottom of the layers panel, way over on the right on my screen. And I'll zoom in so you can see it. Here we go. There are little icons at the bottom of the layers panel. And the one we're looking at tonight is the one that's called FX. There it is. And let's see if I can do this. Zoom out a little. So when I click on that, I get a list of different effects. We're going to go through most all of these. We're going to start with the very first one, bevel and emboss. And to show you these, I'm going to do the effects on type. So we're going to go over to the type tool. The shortcut for the type tool is T. I know you're shocked. Okay, the type tool is now active, and I get, I don't know what to call this little thing, but it's an indicator that the type tool is active, and I'm going to click and drag out a place to put my type. When I do, I get a giant blinking cursor that I doubt you can see because I can barely see it and I'm sitting right in front of it. But it's typical when you do word processing that when whatever program you're using is ready to type, it puts a blinking cursor where it's about to type. So before I type, I'm going to look up at the controls for this tool that we have active, the type tool. And here's the name of a font that I like, copper plate. And the style of it is bold. And the size of it is huge. It's 573 points, which is why the blinking cursor is huge. Sharp, you can have your type be either smooth or sharp or somewhere in between. I'm going to try sharp for now. When you have choices, and especially when you're new to Photoshop, they can be overwhelming. Like just that little thing that we just looked at. It's like, well, I don't know if I want it sharp or smooth. I don't know. So I want to give you some Photoshop learning advice. When I taught teenagers and young teenagers, I found they learned really differently than adults. It was like teaching monkeys. They sit at the computer, you'd put Photoshop in front of them, and they just press every button and try everything. And no one ever broke anything. The worst that happens, you'll do something you don't like and you can undo it. Control or Command Z. So if you're not sure, try things, experiment. You have nothing to lose and you'll learn a lot and you'll find all kinds of great hidden gems in Photoshop. So be fearless, be a monkey, be a fearless monkey. All right, that's my advice, my unsolicited advice. And I'm going to type this lovely photographer is named Ted. So I'm going to type his name. And now I want to go to the move tool, but if I type the shortcut move, if I type the shortcut V, it's going to type a V. I don't want that. So if I hit the escape key on my keyboard, now I can type V and I can move the text around. If I want to change the text, I have to go back to the type tool and I have to it's typical word processing. I have to swipe across to select the type that I want to change. Now, normally in Photoshop, you would not do a lot of type, like paragraphs of type or pages of type. Um, that would be very difficult in Photoshop for all kinds of reasons. But when you're doing something like a poster or um, I don't know, an ad or something, then like here, I just want one word. Then Photoshop has all kinds of cool features in that FX menu that you can use on type. You can use them on other things as well, but it's especially good to have things with a transparent background. Otherwise, a lot of the things you can do won't show because they happen on edges. And if you don't have any edges, like the whole picture here, if everything happens right at the edge, you won't see it. So the word we just typed is surrounded by transparency. It has edges. The rest of its layer is clear. All right, so we have a word. We've typed a word. If I want to change the color of it, again, I have to swipe it. And it has its own little gateway to the color picker. And you can tell because there's a little swatch there. You can see that I picked a bright color. Can click on it. And here's our friend, the color picker. And I can choose a different color and it will color the type. But I like that bright color. So I'm going to hit cancel. I just wanted to show you that that's what happens. When you swipe across type, it shows you that's selected by making it its opposite color, which is why it suddenly looks like that. So I'm going to click to the side, deselect it. Oh, that's interesting. I thought I hit cancel and it took away my lovely orange that I want to be orange. There. Well, didn't change it because I'm sure it was pilot error. Okay, there. All right. So we have some type, and that's nice. But now we're going to try these effects. So I'm going to, with that selected, the layer, oh, I have some other layers there. With this layer selected, my type layer, when you make type, the type layer it tells you it's a type layer because that's what a type layer looks like. The word that you typed or the words that you typed will be there, but you'll see a big capital T indicating that it's a type layer. All right, so I'm going to go down to the bottom of the layers panel and I'm going to click that button I previously showed you that says FX. And if I click on it, it gives me a list. And I'm going to start at the top with bevel and emboss. And it brings up this big layer style window. And this is an interesting window. There are a lot of good things in this window. It looks really complicated, but you can ignore a lot of this stuff and live to see another day. All right, bevel and emboss is checked, and it's also highlighted. And once one of these styles here or effects are highlighted, you will see a little menu of controls that affect it over on this side. All right, I'm going to look at what this does. I have preview checked over on the right so that I can preview. If I uncheck it, I don't see a preview of the effect. You can see the word TED. That's without the effect. This is with the effect. So you want to make sure that you keep preview checked so that when you try these different controls, you can see what you're actually affecting. So I have style, outer bevel, inner bevel, emboss. Let's just try these. This is outer bevel. This is inner bevel. emboss, pillow emboss, and stroke emboss, which doesn't look like much of anything. All right, so I'm going to try inner bevel. And then I have something that says depth. And I can try that. Direction, up or down. Size, ew, that's ugly. All right, there. And soften, but I actually want a hard edge, just because I like it, no technical reason. All right, so we went through those different choices, shading, angle, and we come to something that's very important. We'll see it especially when we do shadows and things. I'm going to zoom in. It's so important. I'm going to zoom in. There it is. Use global light. What that means is you're doing all kinds of effects, and some of them, like shadows, which we'll do a shadow in a while, you get to pick what angle the light is coming from. If you check use global light, any of the effects where you've told them to use global light, if you go in and change the light source on any of the ones agreeing to use global light, all the other effects that use global light will follow suit and change accordingly. So if the light source changes, it will change the light source on all the ones where you've checked this. Usually you want the light source, you want these things to have an agreement about where the light source is. Otherwise, things can look a little wacky. If you want them to look a little wacky, you uncheck use global light, and each effect you do can have a different light source coming from a completely different direction. But that's what use global light means. And usually, especially if you're doing shadows, you want that. If you're doing other things, maybe not. All right, so that's use global light. Shading. I'm going to leave that alone for now. You can play with it. Gloss contour. This gets interesting. Oh, I wonder what these are. So we try it. We just try different ones, and they look different. And we don't have to know their names or anything. They're not introducing themselves. But we want one where we like the way it looks. Okay, so, and this is the default that they had. I'm going to leave it on the default. When you see the word anti-aliased, you'll see that all over Photoshop. Usually you want that checked. It means make it look less pixely. And that's almost always a good thing. I'll let you play with these other things on your own. Just literally, it's just a matter of playing. You can reset these things to the default, or if you really like a particular effect, you can make that the default. There's a button at the bottom. And I'm going to say okay. And now I want to show you something that I promised to show you way back when we started looking at layers. And I alluded to it very quickly, and I went on. But today's the day that we're talking about it. We talked about each layer having its own opacity. So, and I think by now you probably understand what opacity does. This is fully opaque. There it is. And we can turn down the opacity. And then it goes away. We can put it back. Underneath the word opacity is a different little field, and it's called fill. Ordinarily, if you try doing fill on a regular layer, it will seem like it's doing exactly what opacity does. But when you have an effect on a layer, that's when fill does something very different. So we made these red letters, and then we put a bevel and emboss effect on them. And you saw when I tried to change the opacity, it made them less opaque, and I could make them disappear if I wanted. However, fill does something different. I'm going to go up to the fill. You don't really need to see it. You can just listen for a minute. I'm going to go up to the fill and hold down and drag, and I'm going to turn fill all the way to 0. And here's what fill does. It's like opacity, but it only works on the pixels, and it leaves the effect alone. It doesn't affect the effect. So this is just the beveling and embossing, but no pixels, like those red pixels that I had. Those are completely 0% opaque. So this can come in handy if you want to make something look like it's carved in stone. This is kind of how you do it. If I want to go back and revisit the effects, like now I'm not sure, I might want it beveled coming the other direction or something. All I have to do is go to the layers panel, and you see the word effects. It has a little eyeball, by the way, so you can turn the effects on and off. And then each effect you do is listed under that word, and each effect has its own individual eyeball. So I want to revisit the effects. All I have to do is double click on the effects, the word effects, in the layers panel, and I get the window back. And here are some of, here's something that's a little odd. And if I was learning Photoshop right now, I would be very confused, because all those cool little choices we have aren't showing up, because whoever designed this window, who I'd like to have a word with, made it so that unless the thing that you want to look at is actually not checked, but highlighted, only then the controls for that thing will show up. So now we can see the controls. But keep in mind that it frustrated me for quite a while, because I would go somewhere, I would go stroke, and then I wouldn't see the stuff for the stroke, or I would go for other things. So make sure when you want to see the controls and revisit the controls for something, it must be highlighted by clicking on it. All right, so we looked at, and I don't want to see that. We looked at, let's see, inner bevel. Let's look at outer. No, I'm still liking inner. And direction, up or down. So right now it's down, that's up. Oh, I might like that better. No. Okay, we tried. I'm going to say okay. So another thing you should know about effects is that you can have more than one effect on any single layer. So let's do that. I'm going to get the effects window back by clicking on the word effects, or I can go back down to the bottom of the layer and just choose another effect. Either way will get me that window. And I'm going to try outer glow. And outer glow is highlighted, so now we can see the controls for it. And oh, it has an opacity, so well, that's interesting. It's certainly making that show up more. Ted. All right, so that's outer glow. I can pick a different color. Whenever you see a little color swatch like this, it's like a little doorbell. You click on it and your friend color picker comes to visit. So let's see, let's try. We have preview check, so now we can, yeah, okay. I'm gonna scamper right back to where I was. Let's try lighter color. Let's see what it, no, nah, no, I like this better. All right, we tried. So there's that. That's outer glow. And now if I want more effects, I don't have to say okay and close this window. I can try them from this list over here on the left. The same things, it's the same list. So let's try, oh, let's try pattern overlay. And pattern overlay, we briefly in a previous video made a pattern. And one of the patterns I've made, once you make a pattern, it stays in your Photoshop unless you deliberately throw it away. So one of the patterns I made is a stripe. I'm gonna highlight pattern overlay, and here's a stripe that I made, stripe pattern. And let's see, what do we have here? We have opacity, so I can make it subtle or not so subtle. Scale, make the stripes bigger or really small. And angle, oh, that's kind of fun. All right, and let's see, opacity, blending mode. They usually have a recommended blending mode for for various effects, but we can try different ones. I think that's probably a good blending mode for that. Screen makes things lighter. Difference makes things opposite colors. Color burn. Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna leave that. Okay, so we've got 3 different effects so far. We've got bevel and emboss, we've got pattern overlay, and we've got outer glow. And what else do we want to try here? Oh, let's try satin. Wonder what that does. Okay, here's the controls for it. Let me turn it on and off. Well, I think it kind of, let's turn the opacity down. All right, well, okay, maybe. And what else? Inner glow. What does inner glow look like? Oh, I had to stop for a minute because I didn't see the controls. I had to make sure it was highlighted. So let's see what that really actually kind of, well, makes it, maybe. Um, maybe not. All right, so that was fun. Now, if we like this conglomeration that we made of all these different styles, we can save it as a new style and we can apply it to other things, even other documents in the future. New style. And I'll call this, let's see, beveled stripes with glow. Include layer effects. Include blending options. Add to my current library. Sure. Okay. Oh, yeah, well, they always have some ace up their sleeve. All right. So I can also highlight all these effects that I've made, or actually I just click on the effect, and I can, if you notice, there's a little effects, I guess I have to zoom in on that. There's a little there. On the layer itself, there's a little indicator that it has effects on it. So if I click on that, if I right click on that, I get a menu, and I can copy the layer style, and then I can make another layer, and I can paste the layer style. So I'm gonna type another, I'm gonna go to the type tool here, and there, that's his last initial. And I don't have any effects on this, but I can right click on that layer, and where did it go? I can paste. Oh, I have to put an effect on it. Effects. No, I don't. Let's see. Roll. Whoa, way at the bottom. Paste layer style. And same layer style. So effects are kind of cool. I'm going to take the effects off this one. So I'm going to go back to effects, and I'm just going to uncheck all the ones I don't want. Take them off. Because I want to show you, I want to show you a different effect, and that is stroke. And the reason you can't see the big red M is because the fill is 1% there. All right, I just put the fill up to 100%. And now this has a green stroke around it. And I want to play with it. So I'm going to go back to the effects by double clicking on the effects, and I want to see the options for stroke, and I don't because it's not highlighted. So I have to click on it, and now I can see, I can change the size. I can change if it's inside the letter to the inside of the stroke, or to the outside, or centered. So I'm going to do it on the outside. I can change the opacity, I can change the color, but I'm going to leave it because you can actually see it. Now, what I didn't know until I was getting ready to do this tutorial and I started playing, I've been looking at this window for years, and I suddenly thought to myself, wait, what is that little plus sign? What's that? What does that mean? What does that do? Oh, and I was surprised to find out that I could add anywhere you see that, like with stroke, but anywhere there's a little plus, you can click on the plus and add an additional stroke with a different color and a different choices. So I'm gonna add an extra hideous one so we can see it. And then this one's gonna be on the inside. I have to say okay to the color and inside. So now it's really hideous. Now we have, and there's a preview down here. We have a green stroke and a blue stroke on this poor letter. So anywhere you see that, you can have additional, and you can keep adding more. Just hit the plus and you can have a third and a fourth and a fifth. And I probably don't want to see it, but you can do it. Um, so that's stroke, and you can play with some of these others. There's one more that I want to show you before we call it enough. So I'm going to cancel out of this, and I'm going to actually get rid of that layer. We have enough stuff going on. I dragged it to the trash. Um, this, I have another earlier version of this. Turn on this layer, and this one has tons of effects, and we can see what they are by, I'm just going to click on effects, and there are little check marks on each of the ones I use. So I started with bevel and emboss. I put an inner glow, I put satin, I put a color overlay, I put a pattern, I put an outer glow. Oh my goodness. And anytime I want, I can uncheck, like, let's see what this does. Oh, okay. Let's see what this does. Let's see what gradient overlay. Ooh, okay. Let's see what this does. I made it a color. I put a color over it. Let's see what that does. So play with these. It gets fun, it gets hideous, it gets cool, it gets, you never know. You might be very surprised. All right, one more effect that I want to show you. And frankly, it's the effect that's most used, and it's been used for years and years and years. I have a picture, I cut out a picture of a crow, and I brought it in here to show you this one more layer effect. There's the crow. And I'm going to go down to effects, FX, and the very bottom one, I don't know why they put the most popular one at the bottom. It's kind of annoying, but I'll add it to my list that I'll change when I do a hostile takeover to Adobe. All right, drop shadow. Drop shadow is just what it sounds like. It's a shadow that, and here's the settings. By default, the blending mode is on multiply because you want shadows to be usually darker and richer, and blending multiply will do that. So I have the opacity turned down, but if I do this, you'll see there's a shadow, and it's really ugly shadow, really ugly. Distance, watch, it's kind of cute. I can actually change the distance. Angle, you don't need to bother with distance and angle because you can, even with this window open, you can move your cursor over to the shadow and you can drag it around and put it where you want it. I want this down here. All right, and spread. Let's see what spread does. Oh, that's already getting better. And size. Ah, size. It says size, but it's lying because instead of size, it should say blur. There, and now I can turn down the opacity a little. And now it's starting to look a little more like a shadow. All right, as I dragged it around, you can see like the angle and the distance change as I drag it around. Or maybe it's too small, but they are changing to reflect what I'm doing. And with shadows, you almost always want that use global light checked because, again, if you have more than one shadow in your picture, you probably want them to agree that the sun is, overhead at 2 o'clock. So let's see, noise, add some noise. It's just what it sounds like. It makes it kind of grainy. And that's a drop shadow. So they usually don't look great, but they have their charms. Let me turn the opacity down a little more. There. All right. So tonight we looked at effects. We used the type tool and we used another picture. The next we're going to do a couple of small things in the next videos, but the next big skill set that we're going to learn, or at least I'm going to teach you, whether you learn it or not, I don't know, is how to cut things out and select things so that you can isolate parts of your photograph. This particular photograph I took of him somewhere else, and I put it here because I didn't like what was in the background. So it's a composite of other photographs. To do that, you need to be able to cut things out. And sometimes, even if that doesn't appeal to you, if you want to work on something, for example, the lens of his camera was too dark and his ear was too light. If you want to work on individual parts of the picture to affect them, sometimes in very subtle ways, you need to be able to select things and cut things out or isolate things. And there are several tools that do this, and there are a few other ways to do it. Very, very, very important in Photoshop. Even if you consider yourself a very straightforward, formal landscape photographer, these skills are really important. Okay, I hope I see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.